Chapter 38. Back in the swing of things. Summary. There's no time to just sit around in space. If something is an issue, do something about it. Izuku was buzzing with excitement as the 8 of them approached Mr. Xiantuk's bright and early that morning. It'd been a week since their kidnapping, and he was feeling a lot better. Sure, he was literally clinging to Katsuki's arm for dear life as they walked through the town, but that's besides the point. Kacchan had tried to shake him off multiple times, but had given up in the face of Izuku's death grip. It was finally the day. When Izuku first regained consciousness back at camp after collapsing in the forest, the group had had a nice long chat about things. For starters, mandatory bi-weekly therapy circles were instated for this foreseeable future. Well, technically, they told Pyra and Fastel what happened first. They were panicking at the state the group had come back in, and even more distressed when they explained what happened. So yeah, impromptu circle therapy time. It was long and emotional, but after delving deeper into Izuku's current quirkless-related insecurities, and agreeing that a big part of it came from feeling weak and defenseless without his quirk, Katsuki suggested that he learn to fight without it. The suggestion involved some colorful language that ultimately boiled down to it being stupid to just wait around for his quirk to come back when he felt defenseless without it. In the end, it was decided that they should all brush up on quirkless fighting, with the Glockleberry quirk suppressants floating around. Though the others should also start up quirk training to get back to their original skill level. They'd barely been working out or training with everything else going on, but this event just proved to them how important it is. Even Ochako, with her quirk fully functioning, wasn't able to take down the kidnappers alone. Another thing that was decided upon, thanks to Mei's insistence and very detailed slideshow presentations, why did she have those pre-made? Was to add weapons to their fighting styles. With how varied everything was in space, they would need to be as versatile as possible. There would be no backup or letting the adults handle it if needed. All they had were themselves. They needed to be ready for any situation, and according to Mei, the best way was to start expanding their versatility with weapons. More specifically, electrified weapons, due to the Terrans' outrageous electricity resistance compared to most sentients. Which was what led them to standing outside of Mr. Xiantuk's place early in the morning. Izuku just so happened to remember that he used to serve in the military as a weapons expert, and brought up the idea to him. Turns out he was more than happy to give them all a rundown on the various weapons he had at his disposal, and how to use them. Well, except the siblings. A few species that managed to get into space had pacifism practically drilled into their DNA. They literally can't kill someone without shattering their psyches. When it comes to harming others in general, it could be really detrimental to their mental health. So the siblings would just be working out basic self-defense and how to use a low-powered taser. They'd never have to use the techniques if Izuku had any control over it, but he didn't. Sometimes things just happened. So it was better to be safe than sorry. Mr. Xiantuk greeted the 8 of them with a wide grin. His eyes seemed to sparkle with anticipation as he led them over to the area he had set up. Various curious weapons littered tables. Some were recognizable as things like bows, swords, hammers, even a gun or two laying among the piles, while some of them were barely recognizable as something that had the potential to be a weapon. So, Mr. Xiantuk started. My species is more on the warfare side of things. I'm not sure how inclined to violence your species is, so I'm not sure how many of these are even familiar. The Terrans crowded around the table to see all they had to offer, making sure not to accidentally touch anything as they leaned in. Izuku turned his attention from the cool sci-fi shield he was looking at to respond. Our species is definitely no stranger to the art of war. It's an unfortunate reality of life. Mr. Xiantuk looked at him skeptically, sending an appraising gaze over the Terrans. Izuku sighed. He knew they didn't look like much, but literally everyone they had come across seemed to underestimate them. From what they had learned so far, most species didn't have wars even close to the level of violence and atrocities humans did. It was actually kind of nice to know humanity's tendency towards violence was not standard throughout the universe. There were certainly notable exceptions, but it's not like every planet has its own World War I and II or anything. This town was actually pretty nice, and everyone treated them kindly. But that may hinge upon the fact that nobody in town, to their knowledge, had recognized them as Terran Deathworlders, and they had all been sure to keep it that way. After finding out that even among Deathworlders, everyone having a unique quirk was unheard of, they had been sure to avoid using them in front of people. Ochako had to for her job, but she wasn't liable to get famous from construction work. Denki was technically using his quirk, but it was more the natural resistances he had because of his quirk. Everyone else didn't need them for their jobs, so they were safe there. Still, even if people didn't know they were Deathworlders, it didn't mean they should automatically assume they were harmless from their short stature and squishy skin. Izuku didn't like feeling weak, and he certainly didn't want Mr. Zentuk to treat him that way. That's the main reason they were here, after all. And besides, Mr. Zentuk already was aware he was stronger than he looked because of Izuku's work at the dump. He should know better. So Izuku stared back at Mr. Zentuk, unimpressed. Mei, how many people died in both world wars? Mei responded without even looking up. 70 to 85 million people, or about 3% of the total population at the time. Mr. Zentuk looked at the 6 Terrans with thinly veiled horror. Yep, Izuku said with a sigh. And that was a long time ago. Technology has developed a lot further since. The fuzzy purple alien just smiled stiffly. Okay, so the first weapon we have here is the... Denki realized half an hour into the first demonstration that this was probably going to take all day. Mr. Zentuk had said he really wanted them to get a feel for every kind of weapon before they decided on what to specialize in. He got it, he really did, but he kind of envied Pyerpa and Fastel, who got to leave to hang out with friends after Mr. Zentuk decided that they'd only start unarmed self-defense tomorrow. The first weapon he showed the group was, surprisingly enough, a whip, much like the one Midnight used in final exams. Why was this surprising, you may ask? Well, it just so happens that the R-rated hero herself had approached Denki to see if he was interested in incorporating a whip into his fighting style. It seemed totally random for him to use a whip, until she explained her idea. To use a whip made of superconductive material he could channel his quirk through. Now, he hadn't been learning how to use it for too long, but he had passed the hit yourself with the whip phase. So it was actually pretty exciting to see the weapon here. Mr. Zentuk had gone through all the basics and safety points before letting them take a crack at it, and the others were failing spectacularly. Better than he had done at his first attempt, but oh boy was it fun to be the one watching this time. He half expects the reason Midnight offered to teach him was to watch this absolute gem of a show. Is this how Aizawa-sensei felt when teaching Shinso how to use a capture scarf? A brief flit of longing for a certain purple-haired boy filled his chest before he pushed it down. He'd get to see him again, and when he did, he wasn't putting off asking him out any longer. Who knows what will happen next? Demons from the depths of hell? Lovecraftian monsters from the ocean's crushing depths? Who the fuck knows? So, once he gets back, he is asking Shinso out and taking him on the best date in the universe. If he says yes, that is. He was brought back down to earth himself when Katsuki let out a grunt of frustration. This fucking thing is impossible, he said, rubbing the back of his head where he'd been hit trying to crack the whip. Little sounds of agreement echoed throughout the group. Even Izuku was looking at the whip in his hands with mild contempt. Katsuki, on the other hand, looked at it like it had killed his whole family. Denki felt a little spark of excitement buzz through his body. He wasn't good at a lot of things, so he didn't get to show off very often. But this was something he could do. He wasn't good enough to fight with it yet, the reason it wasn't part of his hero costume, but he did have a good handle on the basics. So, with barely hidden excitement, Dinky plucked the whip out of Katsuki's hands. "It's not impossible," he said with what probably came off as a smirk. "Watch and learn." The familiar feeling of a whip settled into his hands. It was a little different than the one at home, but after a few practice swings, he got the hang of it. Katsuki snorted behind him. "I'd like to see you try, Pikachu. Won't be so cocky when you knock a few more brain cells loose." Dinky just smirked at the comment. Oh, Katsuki and his poor pride. While making eye contact with the explosive blonde, Dinky gracefully brought the whip over his head before striking it forward with a sharp crack. Perfect cattleman's crack. Everyone looked on in shock for a second. It almost looked like a few of them were reevaluating their mental picture of the blonde. Finally, Mina bounced up beside him with a wide smile. "Wow, Dinky! Since when could you do that?" Dinky flusteredly mumbled. "Midnight offered to train me after final exams. I'm not very good with it yet, but I don't hit myself with it anymore." Similar comments of admiration came from his other friends, and Dinky couldn't help but smile.